Hey, deserving listeners. Today's episode is an interview. I was on another podcast and they interviewed me about reality TV and some other things. The podcast is called Dear Shandy, and it's a great podcast, I think. It was one of the funnest, most interesting interviews I've ever done. Maybe the most fun, interesting, entertaining, engaging interview I've ever done in my life, honestly. I just thought it was really, it helped that the host was being very nice to me, but really it just, I learned a lot because the podcast is hosted by a couple, and the couple is Sharleen Joynt and Andy Levine, or Levine, not sure. And Sharleen was on The Bachelor. Looking on Wikipedia, she was a contestant on the 18th season of The Bachelor. And it says here she quit in week 7, Sharleen Joynt. She's a fellow HAPA, and she's also a professional opera singer. If you look her up, Sharleen Joynt, it is impressive. So she's a soprano, and boy, can she belt it. As a very amateur singer myself, I'm just thinking, how in the world do you manage without amplification to sing so perfectly and so brightly and so loudly, because it's made for the stage before they had amplification. But anyway, so in this interview, Sharleen describes her own experience being on The Bachelor, and it was an interesting look behind the scenes about what it's like and also the psychology behind it. So let's listen to this episode.
Welcome back to Dear Shandy listeners. Hello, Andy.
Hello.
How are you today?
I'm good. I'm excited.
I am too.
Yes.
You know who might be even more excited than us, though, even though we are very excited, is our Shandies. Because let me tell you, when we came out with our first Love is Blind recap, earlier in April, it was our first time ever watching or recapping Love is Blind. Everyone was like, you must get Dr. Honda. It was not optional.
Yeah, it was our most liked YouTube comment of the season.
Yes. He is both a therapist and professor. He has a doctorate in psychology and a master's in marriage and family therapy, making him, I think, very qualified as a therapist.
Expert witness.
Yes. But he is known especially for his therapist reacts breakdowns of reality TV and high-profile relationship dynamics on his famed YouTube channel, Psychology in Seattle. We are so excited, Dr. Kirk Honda, that you could join us today.
Hello, Shandies.
So, Dr. Honda, today we're going to start nice and easy, asking you about the psychoanalysis of reality TV. We want to know from you, what is your favorite thing about watching couples meet, date, fall in love, all the things on TV, and what is your least favorite?
Well, I think my favorite thing, since I'm a hopeless romantic, is that I really enjoy watching people fall in love, meet each other, and seemingly have a happy relationship. I cry during those moments. It's nice. It's nice to see. Rom-coms, they always get me at the wedding scene. What are you going to do? My least favorite thing about watching, when the show lies to us. That's my least favorite part of watching.
I'm having a strong reaction to that. I totally agree. I don't like feeling misled.
Yeah. Well, the whole premise is that it's, based, at least we understand there's massaging of the truth or editing, but to just flat out misrepresent and fabricate storylines it ruins it. There's enough drama there to show us. And to lie to us makes us feel like, well, how much of it is lies that I've been paying attention to? And then it just kind of ruins the enjoyment.
It's funny you say that, because I feel like after the reunion, that was what kind of miffed us the most. And of course, they all lie to us in different ways, but was sort of like having couples come in and be like, well, actually what happened was this, and what you didn't see was this. You sort of feel like, well, then what did I just watch? Can you give us an example or two of the ways in which you have felt lied to, which is, what bugs you the most?
Yeah. When they seemingly edited it in a way that made it look like Jackie had cheated on Marshall. And then later she came out and said they edited that funny. And then you're thinking, well, who knows? But then Marshall comes out and actually confirms that, seemingly. Plus, Jackie didn't need the internet to hate her more. So I felt that was unkind. And also, again, there's enough drama there. The drama of Jackie and Marshall breaking up and Jackie rekindling a relationship with Josh. That's dramatic in and of itself. You don't have to fabricate details to, make it more exciting.
I mean, I agree.
Yeah, I wonder why they felt the need to do that, because the narrative was enough.
Yeah.
We didn't need to know whether it was the day after or during or before or a week. It doesn't matter. It felt like they were just kicking someone when they were down.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why they couldn't have just allowed the story to stand on its own. It seems like a poor production choice, in my opinion.
For me, the lie that got me was Kwame and Chelsea. It's been over a year. They seem happy. And we know, of course, the scenes that they showed were real. But I also feel like they purposely omitted the happier moments so that all we really had to work with were the negative ones. And I think everyone in their right mind would be like, well, these two are terrible together based on what we were shown. So it was sort of like lying by omission.
Right.
Okay. So I want to talk about, this is sort of a selfish question because I was on The Bachelor many years ago now, but I've long believed that part of why a contestant, I don't want to say why, but a factor in how they fall in love or think they're falling in love is a feeling of specialness. So especially in The Bachelor, where there's 30 women, suddenly there's 15 women, 10 women, 5 women. This feeling of feeling singled out, you're special, you're different from the rest, sort of lends itself to feeling like you see something with this person that maybe if you were out in the real world, you wouldn't necessarily feel. And I think the same could go for Love is Blind or really any of these shows. They're choosing each other. They're both lasting on this show longer because they've chosen each other. Do you think there's something to this belief that I've had for the last 9 years?
Are you saying that when people go on The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, if you just met the contestants in the real world, you might find some compatibility, but the fact that you are vying for their attention and for their love and for them to choose you out of a lot of other people, it could raise the intensity of your feelings. You're not manufacturing like, he chose me, therefore I must. It's just a compelled feeling from within you of sort of an accentuated love or attraction to that individual because they did choose you. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. It's not that there's absolutely nothing there and it's simply because you feel chosen, but it's all amplified by the fact that you're looking around you. I felt this. I got the first impression rose on my season. I went into it thinking, what am I doing here? I did it on a lark. I was having a third life crisis and, it was the craziest thing I ever did. And then I get this first impression rose, which meant that he, liked me the best on night 1 or something. And I immediately saw him differently because I felt special. I felt like he saw me. I felt like suddenly everything I believed or a lot of my skepticism was sort of turned on its head. So would you agree then?
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever really emphasized that part of it on Love is Blind. And maybe even 90 Day Fiancé, because I react to that as well. And just in life, right? That we want to feel loved. And when we feel loved or at least wanted, it's a good feeling. And then we associate that human being with that good feeling. And we all understand through a lot of research that when we have good feelings, we filter everything through that lens typically. Like that's why commercials try to make you have a good feeling or try to have you have some positive feeling because they're trying to associate that good feeling with that product. And then you see the product on the shelf at the store and you have a positive association and you're a lot more likely to purchase it. So on one hand, I think that that's an interesting phenomenon that I hadn't really thought about, that from behind the scenes for you, that is informative. I think another element to this is that for some people, because of their relational traumas growing up, they don't have a lot of acceptance or love or a feeling like they're worth it. And they might be very, very wanting of that, obviously, because they've never felt that way. And to have somebody not only say that they're worthy, but they're more worthy than others around them might be particularly seductive against their own judgment, right? You could imagine someone who is normally not really compatible with this person. If they really checked in with themselves, they're like, yeah, I don't really want to be with this person, but they're clouded by that need to finally have someone consider them worthy and in fact more worthy than others.
Just taking a slightly different perspective, when someone falls in love in life, usually you think of them falling in love with someone based on, physical attraction, personality, similarities, smells, some compatibilities. Yeah.
We were joking while recapping this that there should have been like what do you call it? A glory hole, so you could just smell each other, and touch each other. It's still blind.
It's still blind, technically. But on these shows, I feel like there's another element. There's a fourth dimension to love, which is the subconscious or conscious understanding that there is money and fame attached to this process and possibly, your successful navigation of this process. In real life, people do often marry for money or for fame or for power. And my question to you, and this is more a broad psychological question, but can love, like chemical love, be manifested with the desire for money or fame? Or is chemical love really just about the person, the smells, the physical, the compatibility, all that stuff? Because on these shows, I sometimes feel, and I'm a cynical person in general, but I sometimes feel like some of these relationships, even if they have children sometimes, I'll go that far, I do believe that an element of it that cannot be extricated is that there was this extra level of love that was created by these non-traditional love elements.
Yeah, a dowry involved.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a bonus, a signing bonus.
Yeah, it's a great question. The Shandies, I see why they like you, because I see why they're Shandies, because y'all are smart. I hadn't really
thank you.
emphasized that as well. The research area that is more robust along these lines is that we, in general, regardless of money and fame, will tend to be attracted. And there's a lot of factors that play into attraction, of course, but we tend to be attracted to people who we perceive to be, quote unquote, on our level, whatever that means. It could be socioeconomic, or it could be an exchange of I provide socioeconomic prestige, or I'm up there with that, or I'm above you, but you're above me in looks, that kind of thing. And you can look towards famous examples of those, being manifested. But we want people who are like us. We tend, it's not true that opposites attract. Actually, similar attracts. Our differences tend to be accentuated because those are the noticeable things. And it's, I think, kind of a romantic idea that opposites attract, but we tend to attract similarity. So we're either looking for someone that is seemingly at our level or above our level. And what is level, right? So it's societal. There's really no concrete definition of that. And it changes over the years and through culture and time. So when you're on these shows, you could imagine, Andy, based on what you're saying, I hadn't thought of this, that that you're talking to a famous person, a pre-famous. They're gonna be famous.
They're pre-famous, pre-packaged fame. Yeah,
I love that, pre-famous. That's great. We're gonna adopt that. I like.
Yeah,
that.
You don't know the sun's gonna rise, but there's a very good chance it will.
Right. And you know that you might be famous as well, but you definitely know that if you don't meet someone, you're not going to be famous. Right. So it's a mutual pre-fame comparison that could actually, and an answer to the other question you have is, is it real? And yeah, the answer, because the other examples you can point to are two famous actors who, it's like, why does that happen so often? And why is it so odd when you have an actor, like a really famous actor, like Keanu Reeves or something, who marries someone that's relatively unknown? It feels odd to us, right? The reason why it feels odd is because it's not typical. And again, people might accuse these couples of just marrying because of the fame and the notoriety, but I suspect that they were in love, and it did feel. There's a lot of other factors, smelling each other through the glory hole, for example. And it really brings up ideas of smartphones, like smell-a-phone or something, where you can actually swipe right, left, just based on smell. And we've actually done those studies. We'll take sweaty shirts from each other and put it in people's face and see, are you attracted to this person prior to meeting them? And there's a signal there. It's not all the time. But anyway, point is that there's a lot of factors. But yeah, you can imagine that being an attractive factor that causes people to literally feel more in love. But really, I think what happens in the Love is Blind format is you're sitting there for 16 hours a day on a comfortable couch, drinking wine and having all your food given to you and there's no distractions, there's no phones, there's no work. And you're just in this cocoon of warmth and comfortability, and you just hear this voice. And the other thing is you're alone. You don't have any of your people, so you're deprived.
Yes.
Of any kind. You're deprived of your pets. I mean, I can't imagine being away from my animals, and you're just sitting there on a couch, and then there's a familiar voice. You start to become more familiar with them. They seem compatible and they seem to be into you. And you're like, oh my God, what's happening? And I think that really amplifies things clearly, because a number of them do end up getting married and staying married.
That's an interesting point, because in torture, they find that you can do like waterboarding or like, cracking someone's knuckles. Not cracking, breaking. Cracking knuckles, not that bad. That would be pretty sad if you gave away the secrets. They're like, crack your knuckles. Okay, fine. This is where it's hidden. But I think that sensory deprivation is the most powerful tool in torture, and it's been proven. You can do whatever you want, but when you take away all the senses, I mean, in this case, it's obviously more nuanced, but if you take away someone's senses, they will talk eventually, but that is the worst nightmare. And I do believe that element of it, exactly like you were saying, is what's driving them to like just jump into this.
Do you agree about the sense?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that either. The sensory deprivation aspect of it, and how difficult, there's been contestants on the show who have come forward saying that they were mistreated. And you just wonder if, and some of those contestants, they didn't meet anybody, came forward to the press. So you just wonder if that was another factor, is they left or halfway through, they just felt like they were in a isolation cell in a prison.
Yeah, there's also, God, we're really going off script, by the way. I have questions for you, but I was really hoping this would flow like a conversation. So the idea that, you talked about you're alone in this room and you're comforted by this voice, but there's also the confessionals, or in the Bachelor world, we call them ITMs. It stands for in the moment. And you have to speak in full sentences in present tense so that they can use it wherever. And you spend hours a day in this room. And the higher ups all figure out which producer you're responding the best to, who gets the best answers out of you. So you start being like linked with this one producer a lot over time. So while The Bachelor doesn't take away any of your senses, really, they do deprive you of, any connection to the outside world, your phones, your pets, the internet, books, music, anything that could distract you. And really your only outlet is this room with this producer, where you're encouraged to talk about your feelings for the lead most of the time. You can go off on little tangents, but if you go too far off in a tangent, they're like, so let's bring this back to. And so I think it is interesting that, I guess I'm looking for the parallels, but I feel like in the Bachelor world, it's really that room is where a lot of the magic happens.
Yeah.
A lot of your feelings can be sort of contorted into something more than maybe they necessarily are. Do you have thoughts on that before I move on to my next question?
Well, so are you saying that similar to Love is Blind with The Bachelor, your one person is literally one person to it's the same person for everyone. And not really. Well, in the beginning, there's several, but then as time goes on, like I made it reasonably far in my season. And then by then I was only doing ITMs with one producer. But in the beginning, there was a handful. And then as you're being questioned, if you will, by this one person,
interrogated.
There's a subtle pressure, if you will, an expectation that they're looking for affectionate statements from you about the lead.
It's not subtle.
Yeah.
Okay. You could say it's almost like an interrogation or brainwashing.
Yeah, it's like a re-education camp. That's what it reminded me. When you told me about it, that's what it reminded me of, because they asked you basically until you cry eventually. And I feel like it's like, do you support the current party, the political party? And you're like, no, I don't. This is terrible. And then they asked them again. And they was like, we'll come back in 10 hours after you haven't eaten and drank. And then we'll ask you again. And we're going to ask you again until you say you support us. And then you're going to be good. And when you do that, you're like, I do love the party. The party is good. Yeah. You're officially brainwashed. And I do think a lot of that happens.
Yeah, that's a little extreme. But do you watch the show Severance? Or have you seen? Okay. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure you loved it.
I did.
Yeah. Okay, good. So you're in good company. That scene where she has to apologize reminded me a bit of it. You know, when she has to apologize, but she has to mean it. Yeah. And it takes hours, you know, and she's like losing it. By
that reminds you of what you went through?
No. Like that's like a, you know, obviously an extreme example. So nowhere near that. But I'll put it this way. After my first one-on-one date, which was in Seoul, I was handed off between like 3 different producers in my ITM. And I wasn't, I don't think, effusive enough. This is just what I'm gathering, just because I don't see why this ITM needed to last as long as it did. You know, I wasn't saying key things like I can picture myself falling in love with Juan Pablo. I really think I could, you know, see him as the future, blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, yeah, it was a good date. But I was passed off to 2 other producers. And after the second one, who was another man, I was told like, oh, we need to get a woman in here. They thought that having a female producer would help the situation. And then the next day I had to put on the outfit again, go into a room. So we're not on the location of the date anymore. And I had to go through it all over again. That was earlier in the experience. You know, you start to learn over time that you can move things along and get back to your life and go eat or go nap or go do whatever you want to do with your day if you just sort of tell them what they want to hear.
Yeah. And when you leave the show, you can't claim that they forced you to say anything.
Exactly.
Because it's not overt.
Mm-hmm.
The term we might use is behavioral shaping, in which we'll actually provide the subject, the target, with rewards and punishments based on what you're looking for, the behavior you're trying to shape, the habit you're trying to shape in the end. And we do this to, you know, rats in the lab, but humans, we do it to ourselves all the time. And I'm just going to take a guess and say that they know what they're doing because they've been doing it for so long. Yeah. And that's fascinating. I did not know that they did that. That's really interesting. I mean, they might believe they're being altruistic because, you know, people that stay together after the show, they might have felt like they played a role. And you know, friends might do this like, yeah, but he's a really great guy. You know, we do this all the time when we're trying to, you know, I guess I'm trying to look on the bright side of things. But yeah, I mean, it's a version of re-education, what you're talking about. Yeah. So another thing that I've been advocating for as I watch more and more reality TV is that, one, there be regulations and or unionization or both. And 2, that a part of that is that there's a pre-education for people of like, here's, you know, like an outside independent source of education and advocacy of, you know, here's what might happen. Here are ways in which you can protect yourself. Here's what's to watch out for. Maybe even have observers and they go up to the people. So you can't do that. Like that's crossing the line because the psychological elements of the show are either purposely or accidentally created such that it has a brainwashing or detrimental effect to a lot of people. It really convinces you to do things that you would never have done normally. Now, sometimes it's all fine and good, but sometimes it's not so great. It sounds like for you, it was, well, what was it? Was it damaging to you or was it just like an annoyance?
I would say it falls more in annoyance territory, just in that I don't think I did anything out of character, really. There was one time I was really forced to do something and I wasn't thrilled about that. But other than that, that was my big takeaway. And actually, it's funny you say that. This one event, it was this one group date activity thing. Oh, no, it was the pool party. The legendary pool party. I'm probably the only Bachelor contestant in history who cried when I heard there was a pool party. But in my ITM that day, the producer was like, don't you think you should just, you know, enjoy it, enjoy this experience for what it is, like let it all go. And I said, my number one thing is I want to be able to look back on this and recognize myself. But I thought it was interesting that was his argument. It's like, you're here now, like just do it, just get into it. And I wonder, I couldn't help but wonder how often that worked.
I can see it working all the time. Yeah. I mean, because when we like to think of ourselves as autonomous creatures, but we're not. We are very influenceable, particularly under extreme circumstances, like being cut off from your support system, deprived of other kinds of control and stuff. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but you know, without being draconian about it, little by little, by the time you're on the show, your freedoms are extremely stripped away. I'm guessing you can walk off if you want to, but So you're not like a prisoner, but little by little, there's just little things that you find yourself doing, little freedoms you start giving up. You can't spend your time really the way you can't go to the bathroom when you want. I don't know, like whether they know it or not, that aspect of learned helplessness and just getting under one's skin is a well-known tactic of breaking people down, essentially.
Well, you called it a cocoon. I know you were talking about the pods, but even the cocoon of that environment. As an adult, I don't remember the last time before that, other than school, like maybe college had a bit of that feeling, but where you're just like, you're cared for, and it just feels like there's a bunch of adults in the room who will look after you as long as you behave properly. You know what I mean? It kind of reverts you back to this childlike state.
Yeah, and you feel important.
You feel important.
like a child whose parents love them.
Yeah, and you're talking about your feelings all the time. Like I remember when I left the show, I immediately got back together with my ex, which, by the way, a lot of people do. And after being back with him for a couple of months, he was like, don't take this the wrong way, but you're talking about yourself a lot. And I was like, wow, that was when it really hit me. You know, it happened months after that. It really hit me how it had really affected me psychologically, is that I was more self-absorbed than I had been months prior. And so anyway, that's just a kind of non sequitur. But anyway.
No, that's fascinating. I mean, that is fascinating. And I think that points to disconnection in our current society in some level, because that feeling, and I've often thought about that as well, the feeling of just being on the side of the pods of Love is Blind with the other 14 people on your side, the feeling of, and I'm pretty sure they sleep in a hotel at night. They don't just sleep in a compound, but at the very least, you're spending a lot of time. You're at camp. You know, a lot of these people become best friends when they're on their side of the pod, which you could absolutely imagine. I mean, I've spent time as a professional working in camps with kids, and I'll see kids that don't know each other, and 48 hours later, they're best friends for life. Just being at a camp for 2 days. Imagine for 10 days how close you would be, and how because in our disconnected lives, your best friend you might see once every month for a couple hours in the midst of a very chaotic situation, like at a restaurant or something. And that opportunity to actually feel heard and understood and connected, you're in the same boat. You don't have the pressures. Yeah, I could imagine that being very attractive.
So what you just said brought me finally back on track with our questions, because one shandy, we poll our shandies always whenever we have a hot topic guest like yourself on, and they really came through with questions for you. They're very excited about you, like I said. One of them want to know if you believe bonding over a traumatic event seems to expedite a relationship. And then my follow-up question based on that was, therefore, then, do you think when a couple bonds on a show like Love is Blind, they're bonding over some sort of trauma?
It's a complicated question. So on one hand, might two people bond as they open up about their traumas, however we define it, their sadnesses, their losses, their difficulties, their childhood difficulties, and have that bond be false, if you will? Maybe, but I think more likely is that humans crave realness and connection and mutual dependence. You know, we want to depend on each other. We want someone to need us, and we want to need them, and we want them to reciprocate when we want them to rise to the occasion when we express need from them. And, you know, if you're constantly happy and everything's always good and there's no opportunity for that to be tested, then that's one level of relationship. But, you know, a relationship is really put to the test when you're vulnerable and you show that you're sad about something, or that you've had a loss, that, you open yourself up. And when you do that and the person responds well enough, then you know that the person can be depended upon, because we all want that. So that's the second thing I'll say. The third thing I'll say is there's a fair amount of stigma still around trauma and talking about one's vulnerability. We understand that. And it's in the past, or in certain circles, it's just a general blanket stigma of just like, stop talking about your feelings. You're self-absorbed. You're weak. You need to be strong. Those kind of messages. Well, as we start to emerge out of that, there are still echoes of that. And I hear that when people talk about trauma bonding. It's not trauma bonding. Trauma bonding is technically it's Stockholm syndrome, but people will use it as a term as people will bond over trauma. And my sense is when people talk about that and the tone they use of it, the negative connotations they have around it is echoes of trauma shaming, essentially, and emotion shaming. They'll be like, oh, look at them, they're trauma bonding. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with that? That's called real relationship. And if two people want to bond over their difficulties, like, what's it to you?
Okay, so do you think that dating on TV can make a relationship less or more likely to succeed? Or do you think it really has no impact? And I can word this differently by asking, if you had met, your wife's name is Stacy, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so if you had met Stacy in this setting, let's say Love is Blind, do you think that everything about your relationship, like you ending up married and all happily married, all the things, do you think that would have happened in the same way?
I don't know. I've never thought about that. Y'all ask interesting questions.
I'll take it.
I would like to think so.
Same with us. We've talked about this and we feel the same way.
But I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. I could see her getting annoyed with how much I yammer all the time. So, I'm kind of a Paul, as you can tell. I answer questions in long form. So I don't know how sexy that is. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I love it when someone can say they don't know, by the way. It's one of my favorite traits. I don't know if it's a trait, but I think it says a lot about a person when they're like, I don't know.
I think it's some of the interviews I've seen with some of the most powerful people when they say, I just saw a De Niro interview the other day and he was asked a question and he said a strong, I don't know. And it actually was my favorite part of the interview because there's something sort of appealing about seeing someone who knows their profession and is so powerful. It's just so expert, just being like, I don't know that. So that question is something to think about for yourself.
Okay. I want to circle back a bit to the ethics because we just released, we were behind with Love is Blind season 4. We just released our finale recap. It started after The Bachelor wrapped. We just fell more and more behind. We just went at our own pace. But we've since heard that Irina told production she didn't want to go to Mexico with Zach. She wasn't interested, and they persuaded her to stay. And if she had left, basically she has to get permission to leave. And if she leaves without permission, she owes them $50,000.
Yeah.
And so even though she had expressed discomfort, she got the ick from him. She felt uncomfortable, unsafe. She described this in many ways. Around him, she was still put in a position where she had to go and have a romantic getaway with him, sleeping in the same bed and all these things. Do you think the ethics of producing reality TV need to change?
Yeah, it's hard to know how the conversation went, but you can imagine these producers, these handlers being very adept, as you might be able to attest to, the subtlety of communication, the refraining from saying certain phrases like you must or you don't have a choice. It's sort of like police interrogation. They can't say, once you say, I don't want to talk, I need to talk to a lawyer when you're being interrogated. The police understand that they have to follow the rules. Otherwise, all the evidence might be inadmissible, right? And so I'm guessing that these producers understand that line of, okay, we're not saying that you have to, but and if you don't have the education, if you don't have an advocate, if you don't have oversight, you can imagine someone like Irina just going, okay, I guess I'll go. And the conversation and everyone, okay, great. And now everyone's happy. And all you had to do is give up your freedoms, and they're no longer subtly threatening you with the $50,000. I mean, I would love to see this show actually successfully apply that fee to somebody. I just can't imagine.
It would never happen.
I can't imagine that being legal.
No. And it would be the worst PR ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like Davy and Goliath times 100.
Yeah. And look, I think we can all agree Irina made her mistakes on the season, but I still think that, she looked a lot worse for having gone through with Mexico.
But what I think is worse about it, I actually don't even think that's that big a deal. I think that entertainment is a dirty business.
Okay.
And I think that production is driven to entertain. And in doing so, they need to have certain contractual elements to make that easier for them. What I think was really obnoxious was that she had to show up on that reunion show and not talk about that element. So she had to show up basically representing that she did choose to stay on the show. And she had to back herself up while she was kind of being ganged up on by everybody, except maybe Vanessa. It's just nice to all the women somehow. But I do think that to me was the most atrocious part. If that is true, and
if it's true,
we don't know 100% if this is true, but if it is true, that's the part where I think they crossed the line.
Oh, so bringing her back and supporting that it was indeed her own actions.
And she had to sit there and lie the whole time and take abuse.
Interesting.
That to me was the worst part.
Do you have thoughts?
I guess just to reiterate that I believe that there should be regulations, but there's a line, right? I think the show should be allowed to do certain things. Someone doesn't want to go to the pool party, for example.
Yeah.
During the Mexico trip.
I don't want to go to the pool party. It sounds so whiny.
And they're like, hey, you agreed to go on this show and you're going to get all these good things. So you got to play ball with this here. Mm-hmm. Come on, let's, and I'm just going to say, like, if you don't cooperate with us, we're going to have to take some kind of action, because you shouldn't have come on the show if you didn't realize you're going to have to go in front of the camera sometime. There's a line there. I don't know what that line is exactly, but it's not like the shows should just be like in a bush somewhere filming and there's no influence, there's no guidance, there's no trying to corral. I think that there should be some allowance for that. But like I said, there should be regulations and oversight.
Totally agree. I mean, when we heard about this ongoing lawsuit, I mean, on The Bachelor, you are sleep deprived and you're definitely plied with alcohol, but you're not needing running water and you're not going hungry.
No.
Like some of the stuff they were describing, I was pretty horrified by. Well, okay, so that brings me to another angle of all this, which is the relationship that viewers have. Because let's be real, the reason why the production team of whatever show we're watching goes to these lengths is to create quote unquote good TV, right? So what I want to hear from you is, given this is what you do. You react to these shows and you have a massive audience of people who are interested in your content. What have you learned about the viewers of these sorts of shows by being on your side of things?
A lot of things, but the most notable first thing that I learned was how I learned it was this. I started making just reaction, and I was just reacting the way I react. I didn't really at the beginning think anyone would care, because this is back when my podcast was just a humble little podcast chugging along. And I'd been doing it for 11, 12 years by that point. So, we had an audience, but it wasn't big on YouTube anyway. So I just put it out there and I just reacted, and then people started paying attention. And then there were all these comments and emails and people making commentary about my commentary, saying how wholesome I was and how Mr. Rogers-ish I am. And I'll tell you this, nobody in my personal life describes me that way. So I, if anything, it goes in a different direction. But anyway, I thought, wholesome. Okay. I don't know what that means. And then over time, I started to get more comments and more feedback that they saw me as being nice. They saw me as giving people the benefit of the doubt, having, not being mean, whatever that is. And I thought, well, what are other people saying? Because I didn't know. I didn't watch reality TV really much until Love is Blind season 1. And it was that first week in the pandemic when we were all locked in our houses. And what I learned was, as I went into more of the commentary on these shows, is just how mean everyone is. And just mean. And the commentary is often like, I hate this person, but I hate this person less. That it's like everyone's hated. And then it's this bit. So I have all these theories about it, but I don't know. But one of the hypotheses I have is that, we're all walking around with a lot of insecurities and a lot of pain. Mm-hmm. And similar to the playground in the 6th grade, once a victim of bullying emerges as a understood social role, then the crowd of kids who are insecure, and maybe even everyone, because everyone has insecurities, allows themselves to vent and to get their aggression out and to elevate themselves through social comparison and pushing other people down. We understand that everyone does this. And so reality TV just provides this perfect landscape for that, this perfect playground for people, particularly with the internet, to do that. And everyone has that capacity. I have that capacity. No one's above that. But I think what I'm learning as I watch, more and more of the commentary is just how much people are suffering and how much need they have for some way of alleviating their daily pain.
Even that's a very compassionate.
It is very
take.
compassionate. I find that really interesting.
Yeah.
I agree with it wholeheartedly. I also think it works on the flip side, where if there's sort of a hero that they see, that they feel like, that's me. That's the hero. I love that person. Like on our podcast, if we're recapping, we say anything even slightly critical about that person. We just like, how dare you?
Yeah.
You don't know anything. You're terrible. I mean, that's a paraphrasing. It's much worse than that.
But it is very extreme.
Yeah. It's way over the top. Like, I'm like, whoa, like this isn't even a conversation that should be happening in any circumstance. Like, I think you're misunderstanding. But you can tell that there's like almost a religious affiliation with the entity that we are slightly criticizing.
No, it's fascinating how, I went through this all those years ago, but I think it's gotten so much more intense. But Twitter was still around when I was on the show. And based on certain decisions I made or things I said, many of which, by the way, were taken out of context, or maybe sentences were stitched together that I never even said. Twitter would come after me, and it was the most powerless I've ever felt in my life, because you're also not allowed to say anything, right? You're contractually not allowed to defend yourself or say, I never actually said that.
It's interesting. Sometimes I think about, what you're saying really resonates, how there's a problem possibly with society right now. Loneliness, ostracization.
Nice.
Just made it. With social media. I wonder sometimes if you took these reality TV shows and somehow, let's just say the technology could be done. Let's just suspend the disbelief, and you put them back in like the 60s or the 50s or the 40s. Would the stars of these shows, or the stars, or the cast, would they be as famous as they are now? Would they engender such love and hate as they do now, as they would back in a time when people may have had a little more sturdy ground beneath them emotionally
but I don't know if they had a
mentally.
sturdier ground beneath them then. I think they just talked about it less.
Well, in talking about it less, I think it was more socially unacceptable to be not emotionally solid back in those times.
But I don't know. Okay. All right. So I want to hear what you think, Dr. Honda.
Yeah, those are all good points. We are, on average, in at least my cultural pocket, because we've researched it a lot, that we are more emotionally healthy and open, and we educate people better around these things. And we are a lot less connected on a minute by minute basis. In the 60s, and who knows, because we don't have a time machine, we can't experiment this way. But my suspicion is that what you're saying, Andy, is correct, that in the 60s, people just naturally had reality TV that they were in. Right. They had reality in their lives. They had neighbors and siblings, smaller houses, smaller office, one car for the family. You were always around people, siblings and cousins and aunts and uncles and neighbors. And there was no inside. You were always outside with everyone. That's the only entertainment you could entertain yourself with. And so you had reality among you. And with reality TV, if you showed it to them, they might be interested, but they had enough of that entertainment value and connection and opportunity for, I don't know, just getting upset or falling in love or liking someone. Yeah. So that would be my suspicion, but it's hard to know.
Yeah. I mean, and soap operas were extremely popular back then, but maybe for the real stuff, they were like, I can handle that on my own.
I got enough of that.
Give me the soap opera. I do the reality on my own.
Okay, so since that kind of sort of, I think that's sort of, I'm looking for a segue here. I'm trying real hard. I think that sort of touches on social media, our
It did?
commenting
Definitely.
on these people
Definitely.
and having a platform on which to do it.
You've earned your segue.
Thank you.
Proceed.
Thank you. Woo. Okay. So do you think reality TV and social media reward narcissism?
Well, we have to define narcissism. Are you saying
He's such a therapist? I love it.
Yeah.
Are you saying narcissism as in destructive self-centeredness?
Right. I think we're not talking about malignant narcissism. I think more is what's the not malignant
Yeah, let's have him
narcissism?
define it. Yeah, I want to hear.
Yeah. Just non-malignant narcissism.
Well, there's a lot of non-malignant narcissism. There's healthy narcissism, meaning that it's okay to be self-interested. When someone says, who should we give a raise to at work? You think it should be you because you're in a healthy way self-centered because it's you. So what are we talking about? Are you talking about, did you say social media or reality TV?
I said both, but I feel like they're two very different questions.
Maybe
in a way.
extreme vanity and self-absorption. Like maybe narcissism. I think we get into trouble when you
the
use
word
the word
narcissism
narcissism because there's such a broad range and it's complicated, more complicated than most people use it colloquially. I think we're talking about, extreme self-absorption and vanity and those kind of elements.
Yes. I mean, social media has been understood to do that. I think that we tend to blame social media too much for the problem. The problem is related to a lot of factors that result in being alone. Mm-hmm. If we didn't have social media, we would still be very alone and very isolated and lonely and depressed and more anxious and all the negative effects that we see. Social media, I think on some level, both helps and harms that. By harming it, it keeps us more isolated. There's more social comparison. There's more opportunity for cyberbullying. All this is understood. But if people are alone all the time, sometimes their only way of connecting with other people is through online activities, So, and that's been shown in the data that for some people, they actually benefit from having more social media in their life. They feel more connected, less depressed, less anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Really?
So it depends on the person. Yeah. So the problem of loneliness is a problem related to the materialism and societal movements of keeping up with the Joneses, bigger houses. Everyone has their own car. Everyone has their own TV. Everyone has this helicopter parenting, hyper vigilance regarding child safety, a de-emphasis on child freedom and having time outside with their friends to explore things on their own within reason, of course. So that, and also pumping everyone's minds of, there's a child predator and a murderer around every corner. And so everyone's going to die unless you have constant locks in your house and you have eyes on your kid at all time. Does that raise the safety of children? Yes, but there's a cost, obviously. But in terms of vanity and self-destructive and I suppose other destructive self-centeredness, social media, can play a role. Reality TV for the individuals, well, like you said, for yourself, Sharleen, that when you came back, all you wanted to do was talk about yourself.
Yeah.
Because the show, I'm guessing, encourages you to focus on yourself and to talk about yourself.
Like crazy.
Yeah. And so you could imagine, and I'd never heard that phenomenon before, and it can explain maybe some of the behavior you see after people are on these shows.
And for what it's worth, I always was the kind of person who prided myself on not talking about myself too much. It's the kind of thing that socially I would be very conscious of because it's something I'm kind of sensitive to socially. In fact, I would say one of my biggest social peeve is people who don't ask questions and who just talk about themselves the whole time. And it's not out of an interest of me talking about myself. It's more about like engaging in this conversation. So to have my ex, who I'd gotten back together with, say that to me, it was really, I'll never forget it. Like it made it gave me goosebumps in a bad way.
Well, it's interesting that you were so not that way. I would imagine a lot of the contestants who go on these shows are predisposed to self-absorption. And I wonder if it makes them more self-absorbed or they almost they overdose on it. They're like, oh, this is disgusting.
No,
I can't go this far.
I know enough people who've been on reality shows to know that they either lean into it more or they stay the same.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Okay, Dr. Honda, we want to respect your time. So we're going to just ask a couple of fun ones at the end here. What is your favorite TV show? And separately, what's your favorite reality show?
Favorite TV show of all time?
Ooh, you didn't think that one through.
You know, you could do of all time and currently, and then favorite reality show.
I'll just rattle off things. That
you could do multiple.
I love The Americans. The Americans on FX. I've watched that. You know, it's about the 80s Russian spies that are living in the United States.
Yeah, I've
watched that show half a dozen times.
Wow.
I love The Sopranos. I love The Wire. I love House of the Dragon. I love Last of Us. Severance was really great. Yeah. Star Trek.
Okay, so you liked House of the Dragon, but you didn't list Game of Thrones.
No, I like Game of Thrones as well. You know, just the ending was
disappointing.
Wasn't great. But House of the Dragon I loved because I'm a nerd for that world. And I feel like a lot of people didn't like House of the Dragon because you need to know a lot of backstory to understand what's happening.
Oh, yeah. We loved House of the Dragon. Yeah. There's some good dragon moments too.
I mean, dragons are cool.
Yeah, they gave the people what they wanted in the dragon department.
That was it. They took a poll of like Game of Thrones. You were like, what do you want? More dragons. All right, House of Dragons. Let's do it.
Yeah, everyone wants more dragons. Okay. Oh, especially that crazy huge dragon.
But his favorite reality TV show.
Favorite reality TV show.
Oh, yeah, I would say Love is Blind. I'm a little soured slightly by the lying in this last season, but overall, compared to other reality TV, and I haven't watched a ton of it, I find Love is Blind to be the closest representation of what's actually happening in my estimation. Of course, I can't tell. Like with other shows like 90 Day Fiancé, every conversation is edited extremely, and I can tell it's edited. Whereas with Love is Blind, sometimes they literally will do a 2-shot, like your camera right now, and 2 people are talking. Another show that is actually like that was Real Housewives. I noticed that they would just have a camera and let 2 people talk.
Yeah,
instead of
cutting,
over the shoulder and constantly, splicing things together, because the drama is there, and I think Love is Blind at least has a theme of trying to make real stories, actually depicting real stories in a real way to some extent. So yeah, and also Love is Blind is short. It's only 10 or 12 episodes, and they edit it in just blazingly quick. Other reality TV, they string things out and they have these sort of slow moments in the season. I feel like Love is Blind, they take probably 30 to 40 episodes of entertainment. Other shows would do that, kind of string it out, but Netflix is just like, they just cram it into this 12 hour thing. And it just feels like before you know it, the whole thing is over. I think that is better. It makes you want more instead of telling the show to get on with it.
Get on with it. Yeah. Have you ever seen Temptation Island?
I was just about to ask that. I knew you were waiting for that.
Which one is that?
Oh,
you have to watch it. You have to.
Okay. First of all, great host, by the way, Mark Wahlberg, friend of the show. Not the Mark Wahlberg from, Boogie Nights, the other one.
Mark L. Wahlberg.
But it is, what season was the one we watched that was so good?
Well, we don't have to get
slow down. What's the season?
I don't know. It was around, so it was actually around before The Bachelor. It's super old. And then it went on this huge hiatus and then came back recently in the last couple of years. It was the second season of The Return.
Okay.
And it's basically 4 couples, I think 4, go and then they go live with on this, island or in this resort with 20 or so of the opposite sex, and they're all single.
And they're
very,
just very attractive.
Yeah.
They're all, overly attractive.
It's really kind of messed up, but it's actually fascinating.
It was good stuff.
Yeah. Anyway, highly recommend.
Yes, definitely check it out and let us know.
Okay. So speaking of us saying that, what is your favorite guilty pleasure show?
Wait, Love is Blind is not guilty?
That's a different question.
Love is Blind, not guilty pleasure?
Different question.
Okay.
Yeah. Favorite guilty pleasure show. I don't know if I do a lot of that, but I guess Darcy and Stacey feels like a guilty pleasure when I'm watching it.
Okay. We'll accept that.
All right.
Okay. Dr. Kirk Honda. We had such a great time having you on. This was just such a great conversation. Thank you so much for carving out the time with us today.
Yeah, it was great. Y'all are smart. I've learned a few things. It's nice when that happens.
Oh.
We fake it well.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Have a great one. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Well, he was lovely, as I knew he would be. I love how he's so calm. I can see how he's a therapist.
Yeah.
My therapist is really calming, and I really value that. Especially when I'm like, you're so calm, and just calmer in your presence.
I feel like that's part of the job.
Yeah.
Like you don't want to create anxiety before you even talk about the anxiety.
Yeah.
All right, it's just me at the end of this episode chiming in for an outro. Did you think that episode was a good episode? I liked it. Again, Sharleen was being very kind to me, very flattering. I'm always surprised that anyone even knows about me, let alone thinks anything about me that's positive. I have, a normal self-esteem, self-worth level, but I don't know. I still have that childish notion that famous people are famous, like Sharleen Joynt being on The Bachelor. I always figure like they're this special class of human being that couldn't possibly be interested in wanting to talk to me or like me, look up to me, seemingly. I mean, it just seems ridiculous. So I don't know what to make of that. I think a big part of it is that 99% of my life I'm spending in my office, which is where I am right now. And I'm just here with my wife and my dogs, and they certainly don't worship me at all. It would be weird if they did. Well, the dogs sometimes kind of worship me. I think that's kind of why we have dogs, right? As opposed to cats. Some cats worship as well. It depends. Cats are more variable. Anyway, point is that I thought the interview was great. I learned a lot from Sharleen. It really provoked a lot of thought for me about what it's like for these folks. Of course, it's not a monolith, and also when we were done recording, they said they were coming up to Seattle because she has a performance as an opera singer, and they wanted to meet up with me and my wife, and I'm actually really looking forward to that. I don't know, maybe they're just being kind. But anyway, everyone, please take care of yourself, truly, because you deserve it. You really, really do.